Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Future of Recruitment podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Dan. For those of you that are new to the podcast, we talk with recruitment founders, leaders who share thoughts on AI, partnerships, and the future state of recruitment. This podcast is sponsored by Brellar Group. Brellar works with companies around the world to help design, implement, and manage AI systems and business processes. Today, I'm here with James Marklove, Associate Director of Cybersecurity at Instaso. They're a cybersecurity and information security recruitment company based in the UK. How's it going, James?
Anthony, good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
No worries, no worries. I know I gave you a very brief overview intro there, but for everyone who's listening, could you just give us an overview of yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, certainly. So I was just thinking before I joined, next year I think will be my 20th year in recruitment. So I started back in 2006 with one of the S3 brands. I think I began that job 2 weeks after my last exam at university. So I was looking for a way into business, looking for a way to broaden my horizons after 3 years of hitting the books. And since then, I've moved through the mid-market into a couple of relatively large regional recruitment businesses, and then beginning to find my specialism, which eventually was cybersecurity. So I've been doing that for 10 years now. In the middle of my career, from 2018 to 2020, I worked for an oil and gas recruitment business in Houston, Texas. So that again expanded my horizons a little bit. I think you could tell there's a theme here. I've made choices that have satisfied my curiosity about what was happening in the world and what was happening in the industry. And then here today, I find myself after a couple of years as an in-house head of talent at Instaso, which is part of the JSS group. So as you say, I'm the associate director for EMEA. I'm based out of the UK, covering Europe and East and Africa. And then we have an office in Chicago covering North America. And the JSS group has a much broader reach, much more diverse group of recruiters.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And if we go looking at the past a bit, I know you said nearly 20 years in recruitment, but things have changed probably quite a bit over that time. And if you go back to the start, how did you get into recruitment with S3? And I know there's a lot of very successful people that have come out of S3 from back in the day that have set up big recruitment companies now. So what was it like back then?
Yes, very much so. Of course, the industry has changed, and of course, the service portfolio for recruitment businesses has changed quite a bit. I would say some aspects of the job and the industry remain the same. There's certainly still ways that I approach certain tasks and milestones within the search process. I learned back at S3. I got that job when I think this is a very well-trodden path. I graduated, I was contacted by a rec to rec who was looking for graduates who were able to present themselves in a certain way and had the appetite for a sales role. So I interviewed with several brands and joined Progressive. And that was really being thrown in at the deep end. The culture back then is very exciting. There was lots of opportunity. There was a meritocracy, which I think it probably stays today. And that model still works and still very much a place for in today's industry.
Amazing. And was that a generalist recruitment role, or did you have a specialism then?
I specialized in QA and testing, so software quality assurance and testing in the Southwest market. It's a very, very well-defined geographic and discipline pool that I was working with there. So it taught me some focus.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Really interesting. And then obviously you've gone to a few different groups in between, part of that heading out over the pond to the States. And then that was with oil and gas as well. So new specialism, new space.
It was a little, the business that I worked for and known for their work in the oil and gas industry globally. My addressable market was really in the mid-market. So PE backed oil and gas services firms. But then I also worked with, very large mining companies like Rio Tinto, helping them to map new territories and talent pools, hire for very specific groups, or job groups within those organizations. So it was a diverse role, but as I say, very much broadened my horizons. I think it also opened me up to, or exposed me to, different HR operating models there as well, and a different style of leadership, a different approach to leadership with the executives that I was working with. So it's quite interesting to contrast that with the UK. That certainly gave me a greater appreciation for what talent acquisition could be internally, how it could partner
Yeah.
externally with agencies that were specializing, and how it could serve the business. And I think some of that has gradually seeped to the east as well, went over to the UK and Europe.
Yeah, I was going to say, I bet it's vastly different recruitment style and model with both of those. But what role were you in then? Was that still as a consultant, or is that more of a leadership?
I think for a lot of US recruitment businesses, it's attractive to hire from the UK because we have a culture, we have a tradition of 360-degree recruitment roles here, whereas in the US, they tend to specialize either in BD, account management, or delivery. So there was actually better ROI, it was a bit more efficient than the UK recruiter that could do everything, particularly in the new market.
Yeah. And they say that when you join recruitment, you get the recruiters, it's called the recruitment pounds. You don't want a pound from just sort of drinking and eating and going out socializing. What's that like in Texas? I imagine there's some good barbecue and things out there.
Certainly, yes. Yeah. So there were lots of things to enjoy there. The attitude to life is that you get one life and you live it to the full. So although certainly there was the opportunity to eat and drink, and there were many cigar lounges in Houston that were for client meetings. Also people exercise, they looked after themselves as well. So they try to optimize their lives and live it to the full. And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that approach.
Yeah, the American market's really interesting. There's obviously a lot of companies that start in the UK, head over there, set up an office and expand. And it's obviously a huge market as well. So when you're out in the States, was it a move to a new company that brought you back, or?
I think it was changing economic conditions. So 2020, we all know what happened then. And I think the broader context of what was happening in the US at the time, and then the OPEC price wars as well, Amanda, that wasn't conducive. So the business shrank back. It felt like a good time to come back to the UK. I was about to start a family as well. I wanted to do that here, where we could be closer to grandparents, aunts and uncles, that sort of thing.
And then that's when you got into the cybersecurity one.
Well, I was in cyber for 3 or 4 years before I'd moved to Texas with a great business local to me here in Gloucestershire. And then, of course, I returned to that market. I would have liked to have done more. I think in security in the US, it was lagging a little bit behind in terms of regulation, legislation, federal thought leadership in cyber resilience. It was much more mature here in the UK. So when I came back to it here, having spent some time with US businesses, there was some extra intelligence, there was some extra, there's other words, but experience that I could then apply to working with companies here that were working on their cyber assurance.
Yeah. And what was that like in 2020, sort of going back into that cyber world? So I imagine with everything going down, everyone going remote, opportunities for cyber threats, etc., with everyone being on their home laptop in their home space probably increased quite a lot. Was that an interesting time?
Call it the attack surface. The attack surface expanded enormously for most businesses. And I think there were innovations in technology at the time that allowed for greater management. At the same time, there was new legislation coming in about, particularly around critical national infrastructure. That's continued to evolve, and there's more regulation, more regulation involvement, I think, in some of the verticals. I think at the time where lots of people were changing jobs, there was also a lot of innovation that was coming in cybersecurity. People were inclined to leave corporate roles if they had an idea, or they were inclined to leave government and set up their own and fight for some cash to get seeded and build something. So it was a good time within the security world. That has played out over the last 3, 4, 5 years. Market today never different to 2020, and that slowed down a little.
Yeah. Is that has AI had an effect on that? So I imagine cyber being one of the industries that's had quite a big shift. If now everyone's using various different AI models, pumping loads of personal and potentially professional data into it. How's that like affected? Well, maybe you guys how you work, but the clients you're working with.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's on the risk register for every business. Sure, should be a huge opportunity, particularly to drive down types of things. So CFOs, CEOs are particularly interested in it. Innovators are interested in it, getting to market quicker, easier scalability, more control in some cases, but then loss of control as well. So AI governance is a this year, I think a lot of people in my CISO network are a little fatigued talking about AI and how that could be controlled without running the risk of show their way and creep it into the organization and people's personal usage.
Yeah. How, actually sort of in the space, I was speaking to someone the other day about companies, especially if they're maybe on the sort of 1-200 side, that obviously would have quite a lot of exposure, but haven't got a full-time IT or cyber team and struggling to invest the cash to implement something on a big scale rather than on the risk, and those companies that are maybe on the in-between phase. I know the clients that you're working with, you're working more with the cyber companies that are actually producing the software, or companies internally that are hiring cyber teams, I guess.
Well, it would be both and a little more. So we work with many of the cybersecurity vendors here. Instaso has two sides to the business. We have a tech practice, which I lead in Europe, and we build security functions that lead to greater resilience. We very often do that with private capital clients who are invested into an asset and know that one way to improve the multiplier when it comes to exit is to demonstrably improve the technology posture, but also the security posture of that extent as well. And then on the other side of the business, we have founders James Marklove runs a dual practice between Europe and the US, simply hiring for go-to-market functions for cybersecurity vendors between Series A and Series C. So he's facilitating that growth from those products to market, that innovation, then goes quite well with the transformation agenda for the network and their customers. So that's where we think the two system.
That's great. I imagine that works really well in tandem as well with your actual network, and do you do host the events and things like that and bring everyone together?
Yeah, we should do. We've been showing the vendors, some of the investors, and then my network of chief information security officers, cybersecurity leaders. We bring them together quite frequently. Sometimes it's formal, sometimes it's informal. We try to avoid the pitch. We try to, I think, like the difference within Instaso is that and all the JSS group as well, I know in the kids they work, is that they try to be within the communities and the pools in which they're working, and offer some thought leadership and some advisory in there, rather than being on the outside and offering transactional services. So I think that's one of the things that differentiates us. If I go back to the comment you made a moment ago about organizations at the small or micro size and their concerns, I think this is still something relevant and something that is on the mind of security leaders I work with. Some of them will offer vCISO, virtual CISO, or fractional services to those smaller businesses. The NCSC, the government's very good at offering guidance to companies that just want to have a baseline awareness about cybersecurity themes and what can happen in the event of an incident. I think most people get into the industry because they like the mission, and they do feel a sense of responsibility for the cyber resilience of the UK general and whichever jurisdiction they live in. So it's not as though those that are able to invest in the tooling and the more sophisticated programs at the end of the market are leaving those behind. I think one of the most important things in any business, and also one of the hardest things to get right, is to establish a culture of security and really engage the staff, the business, the data owners, the data processors within a business in information security or cybersecurity themes, and do that on an ongoing basis. I think some of the best executives, or some of the CISOs that are most well known and that I enjoy spending time with, they spend a lot of time in their organizations on really embedding that in the business and making it part of the core mission as well. So not just having it as a cost center and something that the regulator insists that the business must do, but having it to contribute to the quality of the product or the outcome for their end customers.
Yeah. And out of interest as well, are you seeing people go into the cyber world at an early stage, or is it more migrating across and having transitional skills that could set them up well as a sort of a consultant?
It's a little bit of both. It's more the former than the latter. And Ryan, who's the other fellow, I mentioned Jamie with his GTM practice, the CEO of Instaso, Ryan and I have known each other. We used to compete 10 years ago, and we've had a warm relationship throughout that period. So I've really enjoyed joining and working with him here. We speak frequently about names that come up that we recognize, people that we were talking to 10 years ago. And it's really interesting looking at how their careers have developed and the different journeys they've taken. I think right now there are fewer opportunities for cybersecurity graduates or technology graduates that are looking for a career in cyber. I think for a long time, the agenda there's been a lot of discussion about the cyber skills gap. I think that still exists within certain disciplines, security engineering certainly one, but with AI and AI native solutions within cybersecurity, some of the security ops piece can be supported today, some of that requirement without the need to hire. So I think the demand is still there. The jobs may just look and feel slightly different in the future when we work out where AI really fits and where it can be trusted, I think, in the security tools.
And then talking about AI, obviously it's had a big shift in the recruitment market as well. There's lots of AI recruiters and talent marketplaces filled with AI where you can just pull out candidates straight away. How have you guys looked at AI internally? And then you implementing AI or sort of AI forward automation within your own recruitment flow?
I think there are some really obvious use cases that require very little in the way of a business case. We're all in violent agreement that AI note takers, tools such as the one we're using now to produce quality content, those should absolutely be integrated because it's a better experience for the consumer of that content, I think. When it comes to using AI, assist with things like workforce planning, I think there are some excellent, tools out there. I worry in our business, I think I can speak to that, but also maybe a little bit into the TA function as well, because I did that for a couple of years with a cyber vendor before I joined Instaso. I think the burden of procurement configuration and then harmonization of the tools, if you're an early adopter of multiple things with special use cases, that could potentially be an issue in the future. And I don't think any of the large vendors of recruitment CRMs or TA platforms have quite solved that yet. I would say also the fatigue that's grown with, we've seen a downtrend in the demand for TA and recruitment professionals over the last couple of years, I would say, after the redundancies in big tech in the US 3-4 years ago. I think fewer people, plus more AI generated CVs, plus the convenience of scoping, creating job roles using LLMs. I think it's harder for people to find the jobs and have the conversations that they wish to have. And I also think it's harder for TA teams and for hiring leaders to find the people that they really want to be speaking to about these roles as well. So the verification process, the validation process of skills, experience, and behaviors, I think is more complex than ever.
Yeah, so you have it where job specs are written by LLMs and then CVs get written by LLMs to match the job spec based on your experience. And is it taking the human side out of that application process and making it a bit irrelevant, do you think?
Well, and then if we extrapolated that, a hiring manager receives a batch of 12 CVs, uses an LLM to rank them against the job description, and they interview the top 4. They then use a scorecard that is created by the LLM to assess those skills. I think it's why human involvement, human interaction, and human engagement, it can actually be, it could offer a competitive advantage for an organization's hiring for scarce skills. I think in certain cases it can help expedite break down cultural barriers or connecting with local hiring norms if you're trying to access a new market or if you're conducting a global search for a very niche skill set. But I would like to see it used to open the door and to facilitate conversation, create space for people to have proper human conversations.
Yeah. I guess that also shows the need for proper recruitment and search companies that can find the right people through all the noise, through all the thousands of applications that come in. I know, like we used to put up job ads and have like 100, 200, 300, 500 applications that come through, and it's impossible to go through them all. Obviously, AI helps, but from from sort of my opinion anyway, the whole reason that, or the best use case for AI is just to try and simplify and automate a lot of the admin, so you can still, like, you can have more conversations face to face and have more human interaction.
I think so. I think you could run an automated or an AI avatar-led recruitment process end to end for some roles, especially with the volume hiring requirements in some job groups. I think transparency and communication around that, and why an organization is choosing to hire in that way. I think it's important to be transparent about that with applicants. I think it's also important to seek and listen to feedback to refine the process over time. But if I think about more complex hiring requirements, or if a business is perhaps hiring something for the first time and needs to form a search strategy that requires engagement with stakeholders who perhaps don't have the domain knowledge, so it needs to be curated. I think the reassurance, I think there's some delicate topics around that require for a human to be involved, and a lot of that interaction conducted face to face.
Yeah, indeed. I know you mentioned obviously a few tools that you're using at the moment, but with the whole complex process, if I did have an AI wand and you could automate part of your process, or one of your processes inside your function, what would that be?
I would like integration across the tools, across the suite, if I'm honest. And if I could be a little less reliant on Microsoft products, that would be pretty helpful as well. Yeah, I'm gonna be diplomatic and say a more integrated tool set, which doesn't necessarily mean a single vendor, but a fewer vendors, and those vendors playing mostly together.
Yeah, I think definitely you can go and buy all of the different AI tools you want, but unless you've got a good business process and good system that actually lets them speak to each other, or work in a unified way, then it can actually make things more complicated rather than save you time.
Indeed.
Yeah. It's really interesting that. I think I'd speak to a fair few people about this, and that's sort of one of the main things that people want to see, is actually how they can all work together, which tools can work together and complement each other rather than competing against each other. Um, yeah, it's really interesting. In terms of the sort of future there, what's the future for Instaso? Where are you guys going?
Well, we've had a great start to the relationship with JSS since the acquisition. The plans for next year are ambitious, absolutely achievable. I think growing our international presence, doubling down on our market specialisms, doubling down on our hiring philosophy, which is to take specialists with a depth of knowledge in a market and a mature approach, I think, a human-centric approach. That seems to be what's connecting with our customers. It's driven some great performance and growth this year. We anticipate that into next year. I think for Instaso, the Chicago business will continue to grow. I think it will likely overtake the UK, the EMEA business in terms of revenue next year. Of course, the target addressable market is much larger, but that team is really strong. It's formed very well under Josh. In the UK and Europe, we'll continue to be led by our clients. We'll continue to immerse ourselves in the communities. Yeah. Lead on some of the initiatives, some of the charity work, some of the thought leadership work that we've done so far. I think we'll look to expand our network and work in collaboration with our colleagues in the US when it comes to partnering with our venture capital and private equity clients. Many of those are global, so it makes good sense that we align our global practice to them. There's lots to look forward to, I think.
It sounds like an exciting year ahead. And as things develop and change as well, I'm sure there'll be new things that come in from technology point of view, or challenges in the market. What do you see do you see yourselves implementing more AI processes to try and make everything tie nicely together?
I wouldn't say too much about that. I'm worried about our RevOps director, Sam, listening to this, and I need reining in a little bit. I'll be absolutely led by Sam on that. She has a great nose. She has a very pragmatic nose for technology and what offers good ROI and what is really going to make a difference to delivery from our customers, not just the shiny things that have been positioned well to us on LinkedIn or in SDR contacting one of the team. So I think process and connection with people, continuing to refine how we're communicating and how we're listening, I would rank that above developing our tool set and the technology internally. I think one thing actually that I perhaps missed with that is integrating our systems with JSS as well. There's some work going on there so that we're we're taking another step forward in terms of becoming one family there. So we won't lose our philosophy. We won't lose our approach to work. We won't lose our team culture. But of course, we want to spend more time with our colleagues at JSS too.
Excellent. And I know you mentioned obviously the communities that you've got. Have you got any events coming up for cyber leaders?
I do. The next one I think would be February the 11th at the Groucho Club. So this will be a session, an evening session on CISO career development. So we'll have a panel of 3 or 4 speakers there who are tenured CISOs who've then moved into a slightly different direction in their career. So we'll have someone that's progressed, as some people may see it, into a CIO role. We'll have someone who has left the corporate world and an amazing corporate job to become founder. And they're actually developing a deal evaluation technology. It's AI-based, of course it is. So Runley at Dionic AI will be speaking about her choices, her journey, getting the product to market. We'll then have a private equity portfolio CISO from one of the top 3 PEs. So his role, I think many of the CISOs I speak to aspire to be in that job. They consider that to be the pinnacle. Be interesting for this person to talk about the pressures and the fun that they've had over the last 3 or 4 years. So that should be an interesting event. That'll be invite only, but if anyone out there that's listening is interested in that, then they can obviously contact me too on LinkedIn or wherever you put details on this when I can look this launched.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, rounding off before we tie up, if anyone does want to sort of get in touch or is interested in talking to you, if you're happy to, what's the best way to get in contact?
So, and then what LinkedIn is the ubiquitous recruiters tool. You've got the Instaso website as well and the JSS Group website. You can find my profile there. My surname is not difficult to track down. So yeah, please drop me a note if there's any comments or feedback on the podcast, particularly any colleagues from over the last 20 years who want to get back in touch.
Excellent. Well, look, James, really, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's great to hear your story, hear what's going on at the moment. And yeah, sounds like very exciting next 12 months and future.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the work you do on this as well. I'm sure it's going to be a great series when it's launched.
Thanks very much. Cheers, James. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Anthony. Bye-bye.